Very excited to be here today with Heather, who's had a very exciting career, both in advertising and recently for the last 8 years at Mars. I'd love to probably start by, before we get into talking about innovation and AI, probably just learning a little bit more about your career. What made you move, I guess, from so long in the agency world? I think you were 11 years at DDB, 15 years at DDB. What made you move onto the brand side? What drove that decision?
Yeah, so welcome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I loved being on the advertising side and on the agency side. I had a wonderful career at DDB that took me around the world, actually. So I started in Chicago and then took an opportunity to live in London, and then that led to me moving to Hong Kong, and then my last chapter of my career with DDB was in New York City, working at Tribal DDB, which was the digital arm of DDB, which is where I think we did some work together back in the day, Media Monks, and which I know is now Monks. But and then my last 3 years at at DDB, I was running the global relationship with Mars. Which then helped me transition into Mars. So I think there were a couple of reasons why I moved to the brand side. One is I got my MBA at NYU Stern and really realized that while I loved communications and the advertising side of the world, I was also really curious about brand building beyond communications and wanted to be part of that machine of how that all worked. I had spent a lot of time working with CPG companies and was just really always kind of fascinated with the work that came behind the scenes, and then also being able to set the strategies for those brands. So when I was leading the Mars relationship, I was also very focused on upskilling all of the CMOs on brand or on digital innovation, and really just helping them understand the new. I mean, this was back in 2015, so it feels like ages ago. But at the time, Mars was very much a reach-driven culture that was all about mainly TV, mass reach, and I just saw that an opportunity to really kind of help upskill the teams on what digital meant. And it didn't just mean targeting and segmentation and losing reach, but it meant helping us reach more people in a more effective way. So I moved over to Mars in 2017 to actually create a function with our digital platform. So becoming the global partnership director, creating relationships with Google, Facebook, Facebook at the time, now Meta, and then eventually Amazon and TikTok and Snap. And so really what it was all about, kind of bringing that understanding of how to develop the right content for those platforms, and then how to develop long-standing relationships with those platforms for us to take advantage of never been done before opportunities, and really going beyond just a standard media JBP, which was, it was more than just an efficiency play. So, and now since I've been at Mars, I was doing that role for a while, and then moved into Mars Snacking, and now I am leading brands and content for North America, which means that I set the communication strategies and develop the content with my team across all of the touch points, consumer touch points. So very exciting.
I love hearing about that, because I think what I pulled out of that is that when you were on the agency side, you saw a level of innovation and creativity, I think, and you wanted to take that into the brand side. You wanted to help them adopt that. How, looking now at your relationships with agencies, how important are those relationships and the different types of agencies that you work with, especially when it comes to new creative ideas and new innovations, and helping your teams adopt those at the same time?
Yeah, I think having the agency perspective at a brand is really, really important, because what I appreciate so much about our agency partners is that they're able to challenge us where we may be too inside focused, and also bringing new ideas that we haven't really thought of that help us engage with our consumers on a deeper level. I also very much appreciate the agency mindset, because I feel like as I grew up on the agency side, it was very much you had to be agile before agile was cool. And so it was really about like changing your mindset from meeting to meeting to adapt to different client needs and demands, and that has served me really well on the brand side of just really understanding where people are coming from and having that perspective so that I can help get the best outcome without sacrificing any of the work. And so I think from an agency perspective, it's really being open to where they're coming from. They have incredible amounts of data and input, and then also just that, like I said, the outside perspective of helping us probably see things that we may not be seeing in a way that just helps our brands show up in better places. But it's always a conversation, right? And like there's things internally that they may not have as much visibility to. So it's all about a deep partnership, and I'm happy to say that we've have longstanding partnerships with our agency partners, and that is our goal to continue, because it's all about really they're an extension of our team. So it's really making sure that they live and breathe the brands the way that we do internally.
Yeah, and I think so critical to brands to have innovative partners to be able to bring in that perspective. I think particularly the huge shifts in innovation that have been seen through the last few years, AI obviously being one of them, but just even from a digital transformation perspective and a consumer perspective, the way that you can interact with consumers now is completely different. It's non-linear. The funnel is dead, as some say. How have you managed to put importance on innovation to drive growth for the brands within the organization like Mars, and make sure that you're continuously fostering an environment for your teams to be trying new platforms and new technologies, but also being risk averse in that sense? And how risk averse are you when it comes to driving and adopting innovation?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think it's a balance, right? So one of the things that we really realized a couple of years ago was that the traditional funnel is dead. And I mean, I know from my own personal experiences, I'm sure many of you have experienced, is I'll be on TikTok and then 30 seconds later I'm buying something that I didn't think or know that I needed. So, and then it shows up a couple of days later and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I bought that. So it's like an endless cycle. But I think that one of the things that we realized is that really starts with how we are organized from not organizational structure, but how we work between, what are the ways of working between marketing and sales. And so we've really had to rethink that, because in the past it was really like our marketing teams would create content and then hand it off to sales, and then it was very siloed. And so what we really have been focusing on for the last couple of years is making sure that our marketing and sales teams are really interconnected. So what does that mean? It means that when our Walmart key account manager is talking to Walmart, they are understanding programmatic media in the same way that our media teams understand retail media and the impacts that has to our overarching, not only our JBP with Walmart, but then also how does that impact our overarching media buy. So we have this vision that we talk about a lot, which is the right engagement at the right time, the right offer at every relevant touch point for everyone, because we still have to reach everyone with our products. And so it's how do we do that in a way that makes sense for the audiences that we're trying to reach, but also in a way that also is relevant for them. So when we talk about right offer, it's, making sure that we're capturing people in the moments that they're searching for already. So if somebody's searching for graduate gifts or wedding party favors, that something like a custom M&Ms ad would come through to them because that's something that's really relevant to them at that moment in time. Versus movie night snacks, which would have a different result. And so making sure that we have the right products to appeal to those moments that they're looking and searching for. So I think from an innovation perspective, it doesn't sound like super sexy, but it's like kind of the back end wiring of how we are able to set ourselves up to make sure that we are always inspiring moments of everyday happiness with all of our consumers at the moments that mean the most to them. And another thing too is that we're still very much an impulse-driven category. So it's also about making sure that we have the right messaging that then helps consumers remember our products so that when they are at the point of sale to actually buy products, that they remember and purchase our products.
And I think it's so interesting when you have so many different partner retailers, so many different even platforms that are offering social commerce now as well. All of those touch points and journeys are completely unique from a content perspective and a messaging perspective. So I can imagine internally being able to operationalize that from a marketing team's perspective to ensure that you're producing enough volume to have those levels of personalization, but also making sure it feels relevant to those consumers where they're at, because each one is very unique. Layer on cultural nuance, layer on seasonality.
Yeah.
That just can become immensely complex. And I think we're talking a lot to clients at the moment about the impact AI can have from a Gen AI perspective, of course, and that's unlocking amazing ways to unlock creativity. But I think from a workflow perspective and an automation perspective, it's really helping solve similar challenges that we're finding in our larger clients like yours, where the marketing organization, the workflows might be 10 steps and be easily able to be mapped out, but in reality it's much more complex. And where AI can really come in and help is being able to connect an automated workflow there and being able to help find that audience signal, match it with that creative messaging, produce the content at a much faster speed and scale and at a much cheaper cost to be able to then fuel the demand that you're feeling from your Walmarts, your Amazons, across their own channels, across their even ad tech channels as well. And that's where I think we're seeing the immense amount of help that you're clearly thinking of in the right way. So it's interesting to view AI in that sense. I think when we can probably talk a little bit more about AI, and I think as we think about the ability it has to unlock creativity and campaigns and create really engaging moments to connect with consumers, how have you explored this? Do you have any exciting cases you could share with your brands where you've played with Gen AI creative or campaign creation?
Yeah, so we have been experimenting a lot. In last year, we launched a AI innovation lab, which is based in our Newark headquarters for North America, where it was really around getting associates familiar with AI technology, just overall. And obviously, we take AI very seriously. We have a responsible AI board that is very, very focused on making sure that everything that we create is done in a responsible way. And so from that, we've been able to, and just watching consumer behavior, and obviously we're consumer obsessed, so we always put consumer at the center of everything that we do. And so looking at one of the examples that I can give is looking at is with Starburst, and looking at the ways that consumers have enjoyed our products over time. And what we found is that consumers like to play with the Starburst products before they actually eat them. So they're like stacking them, they're melting them, they're doing all these things. And we're like, oh, that's really interesting. And not something that we really think about when we're talking about messaging and reaching consumers. But we're like, this is really fascinating how consumers are playing with their candies before they actually eat them. So we launched a campaign last year called Different Every Time, which was the first campaign for Starburst in about 12 years. where we really focused on, first launched it with UGC, so amplified what consumers were already doing with our products. And then we realized that the reason why they're playing with their products like that is to almost take them out of whatever mundane tasks they're having to do at that moment in time. So if they're studying or if they're getting ready for, big career moment or career presentation or something, they are playing with it almost as like a stress reliever, as just kind of a way to transport them out of that task that they're working on. So we worked with Gen AI in a very responsible way that was a closed environment, using licensed imagery, where we would shot real life talent against green screen and then combined that with the imagery that we licensed to create those other universes that they could be transported to. And so it was a really interesting way of figuring out, like, how do we, like, I mean, this came out to be like over 300 different assets that we created just through AI to just kind of figure out, like, what are the ways that resonate most in terms of transporting those consumers into different worlds so that they're not focused on the task at hand, which is boring studying. So it's things like that we're just testing and learning and trying to figure out how do we create campaigns that resonate with our consumers based on what they are already doing with our products.
Where did that trend come from? Did you pull that directly from social? Was that your social team seeing that? Yeah. I think we're seeing so much now that a lot of this is happening so quickly on social.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a level of speed in brands creating a campaign or getting on the moment, but making sure they're not probably doing it too fast. So how do you work with your social team so they're able to push those trends up quickly to you and then being able to also get that creative to market fast? And how quick was the process of that Starburst campaign getting that to market quickly?
Yeah, it's really, we're always very measured, right? So we want to respond quickly to the cultural moment, but we're looking at things in more kind of a long-term relationship where we don't feel like we need to hop on every single trend that's happening if it doesn't make sense for our brand to be there. In the case of Starburst, it made sense because it was our product that they were playing with. So, I mean, from the beginning, we started with just comments on what these people were already doing, and then connected with individual creators to help amplify and push that out from what was organic to paid. And then that's what then led to our overarching campaign that we created, inspired by all of the millions of ways that people were using our product. So it was kind of a phased approach, just in terms of making sure that we were working with creators and working with people that wanted their voices to be amplified. So many brands. I'm excited to hear that you were playing around with Gen A imagery. We still have so many clients that are risk averse in that sense, especially from a licensing perspective. Mm-hmm. So that's great to see that there was a campaign that went into market with that imagery. Yeah, and I think that it's still very much like there's so much potential for AI, and AI is amazing in so many ways. I think that our biggest learning from that experience, the campaign, was that it's not everything that AI generated was something that could go to market, because there's still like hallucinations that happen, like items that are like glasses were floating in some of our creative that like there was never glasses in the frame, and we're like, where did that come from? And so it's not like, and I'm sure everyone who's experienced developing content on AI, it's not just ready when it's generated. Like, you really it actually takes longer in the back end to really analyze and look at the creative and make the content, make sure that it's actually ready to launch. And there are limitations. You can't just like Photoshop things out. So that's the other thing that we really learned is the process right now takes a little bit longer. Obviously that will continue to advance at a rapid pace, but I think it's easier to talk about than it is actually in reality in terms of making that come to life. And I think, what another thing that's important that I've mentioned is making sure that we're still using real talent and not using like AI generated talent, which I think is really, really important. So.
I know we have 5 minutes left.
Oh, wow.
I know. That
really
flew by.
fast.
You had a really great example I loved hearing just before around Snickers.
Yeah.
And I think a different way to do an AI-based campaign where you're actually looking at users having an interaction to create more personalized creative for them to interact with. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we launched an AI chatbot featuring Jose Mourinho. And he's just like, for those of you who know him, he's a football coach in Europe. And he is very much, like he's got this like very like kind of sarcastic, like deadpan way about him. And so we partnered with him and licensed his voice to have our consumers send their friends different messages around ways that they've maybe messed up or made some kind of rookie mistake. This is obviously with our Snickers You're Not You When You're Hungry campaign, which has been around for over a decade and is really taps into the cultural truth that you are not you when you're hungry, right? So it's kind of the long-standing truth that everybody feels when they're having out of sorts moments. And so it was partnering with him to then allow, if you kind of made if you had like an out of sorts moment in a presentation or whatever, I could send you a message that says through Jose's voice that says try better next time or whatever. That's just really funny and just kind of evokes laughter and very lighthearted, but in a way that helps drive connection, not only between the two people, but also with the brand itself.
I love that example. I think when you have such memorable brands like Snickers with such long-standing generational humorous and these brand platforms, scaling them in new ways when emerging technologies and channels are erupting. I love that example so much because that's just a way you're able to truly extend it, but you're engaging audiences in new ways. You're also connecting different technologies. And I think it's just a great example.
Yeah. So
amazing.
Thank you.
I wonder how much time do we have? Well, 3. Maybe we can look ahead. I just am very curious. You've obviously helped drive innovation for Mars for a long time now across the brands. What's exciting you about the future in terms of trends, whether it's consumer trends, maybe new emerging ad tech platforms, could be anything. What are you looking forward to the most?
I think for us, it's really how do we continue driving our modern approach to brand building, right? So it's really about the things that we've talked about around making sure that we're driving personalization at scale. So things like the Jose Mourinho example and even Starburst, and also co-creating with our communities so that we're bringing the consumer voice in more. That's something that is a little bit tougher for us because it's hard to. We don't want to give up our brand IP, but how do we do that in a responsible way? And then through that, creating those connected brand experiences. So I'm less focused on like a new technology, and more focused on how, as being the thing, and more focused on how can new technologies help us continue to drive culturally relevant work and content.
And I think more than ever, these platforms are, like what you said around, you have to relinquish some of your brand to the consumers in a way, especially to these channels, especially with channels like TikTok or whether it be live streaming and creators being able to have put their own flair on your brand and the creative and the way that they speak to it, but also sticking to the brand truth and what's memorable is really important as well.
Absolutely.
Well, if anyone maybe has any questions for the last minute, that would be great.
Yeah, I was interested in, your approach in terms of adapting the change in the last 10 years or so. There's been influencers who are constantly targeting mothers and parents in general to talk about how they have to reduce the sugar intake with their family members and their children because it potentially leads to the habit when they grow up, and it leads to insulin resistance and everything else. So how do you plan to adapt to that? What is the strategy to adapt to that change that's coming about in terms of health and reduction of sugar intake?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously take that very, very seriously. I think first and foremost, we don't target anybody under the age of 16. So it's very much focused on adults that can make their own decisions and drive their own purchase products. That's first and foremost in terms of making sure that all of our content, everything is targeted to adults, and making sure that we are being responsible in terms of how our products show up on shelf and everything. So that has been a principle for Mars since the beginning of time. So that will continue to be where we're focused and making sure that we're very, very strict on that policy. Yeah, we have a ton of products that I can't talk about, but that focus on healthier alternatives, and that is something that we're launching probably in the next year or so. So watch the space.
You mentioned earlier about bridging that gap between sales and marketing, and where we see things like rising cocoa prices across the globe right now. I'm curious just from what you're doing on the marketing side to provide kind of extra value for those sales teams, where they're kind of probably hearing it from their end consumers of, we're seeing these rising costs, maybe there's a little bit of pushback, and Mars has done a really great job of always being very consumer centric. So curious what you're continuing to do in the face of kind of those inflation.
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't get into too much detail, but that is a challenge that our entire category is facing, and so making sure that we are being fair to how we're showing up to the consumer and continue to drive value in ways that are both expected and unexpected is kind of always our key to making sure that we're being responsible as a company and as our chocolate brands. And then also, I think back to the other point, driving different kinds of innovation that will help continue to offer products that appeal to all of our consumers in ways that continue to have us continue to be at that forefront for consumers. So I think, and that's a very important point in terms of making sure that our marketing teams and sales teams are interconnected with each other to make sure that we're driving that messaging through the funnel that doesn't exist anymore.
A large amount of content, right? It's without sacrifice the outcome and interaction with the consumer. So on the world of DAMs and PIMs and in the world of CPG, guilty, how do you leverage this enterprise services to ensure that the quality of the content created is also the content deployed, going through all this wish-wash, DAMs and PIMs and salsifies of the world?
I love acronyms. And the sad thing is I know exactly what you're talking about. Digital asset management is what she's talking about from a DAM perspective, in case there's anyone that's like, why is she swearing over there? So there's so much to say about this. I mean, I think that the first thing is about upskilling our DAM, which we've actually just done in a way that is actually AI enabled, so that we have, this is super not sexy, but that everyone has access to assets that we can use. And it's funny because in the past it's been kind of a little bit more the DAMs haven't been very user friendly, which is kind of funny because that's kind of the whole point of them, but they've continued to advance. And so as a result, we've been able to give access to our agency partners, to people internally, associates internally. I think the quality definitely is something that that is our focus, our primary focus. And so I don't have like a answer for you other than it is something that we need to make sure as we are tagging all of the individual pieces of content that quality continues to be the forefront, because we at Mars are known for the quality of creative that we put out in the world, and that will always continue to be the case. And so making sure that we have all of the talent rights, all of that stuff that enables associates to make the right decisions about what actually gets deployed. And then I think to the point that I was making earlier about the Starburst work with Gen AI, it's making sure that we're not that a human is reviewing everything before it goes out, because it's not just, yes, we love automation and making things more efficient and easier, but it can't be at the cost of quality. So, but I'm happy to talk to you more about that offline.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.